everyone. Welcome back to Unhoused and Unfiltered. We haven't been canceled yet. Episode number 2 is coming up. How you doing today, Sarah?
I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day, and I'm excited to be here and to hear a lot about your recent trip to DC.
There's a lot going on across the housing space, as we all know, and there's been a lot of changes federally. So it's going to be a great time. And I know we have a guest today. It'll be a great chance to hear what's going on.
Yeah, I am so excited to welcome Elly Jordon from the Michigan Poverty Law Program to our second um, podcast. I've had the privilege to work with Elly and to know Elly for quite a while, and she's just an extraordinary advocate on behalf of folks in poverty. She's a 2011 MSU College of Law graduate. She has worked in immigration law, benefits, worked with survivors of violence, and has worked extensively in complex litigation, and she just most recently had a really important Sixth Circuit case. I think I want to emphasize that not only is she a great lawyer, she's a great person. She has done work in El Salvador. She speaks Spanish and has worked on documenting absolute horrific genocidal crimes in El Salvador. And her heart has always been as an advocate. And so we are really, really privileged to have her here to talk today about some of the public benefits changes that what we used to call a big, beautiful bill, but now happily refer to as HR1 because it was neither beautiful, might have been big, but it was not beautiful, and talk about how that's going to affect the people we serve. So, Elly, can
No,
you just tell us a little bit about yourself? And sorry, Nick, I didn't mean to cut you off.
no, that's perfect. I was just going to say I'm excited to hear about this because there are so many changes that came out through HR1. So this real relevant topic for today.
Awesome. Welcome, Elly. Just tell us a little bit about who you are and how you do this work and what the Michigan Poverty Law Program is for folks who are new to this.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for serving unhoused folks and all the people who are trying to make things a little less awful for people around our state. I really appreciate all that you do. So I am a lawyer. I work with Michigan Poverty Law Program. As you said, I am the public benefits attorney for our program, and we exist, Michigan Poverty Law Program, as a real resource across the state for attorneys and advocates who are serving low-income Michiganders. We have a focus on trying to enhance access to justice, access to affordable living and housing, consumer law, family law, as well as public benefits and racial justice. And so our efforts focus on making sure that legal aid and other advocates are trained and able to respond to new changes in the law, and then also to advocate for change. So I work on both systemic advocacy as well as legislative advocacy. So I think I have the best job in the world. I have come to this work through a lot of work that I've done has been with people who are marginalized and vulnerable, and experience different kinds of victimization. And one of the things that kept coming up for me throughout my career was the need for a social safety net. And when I felt that I was able to help someone get closer to accessing the social safety net and protect their families from hunger, protect their families from maybe losing different protections, I felt that it was one of the most helpful things I could do. And I am a strong believer in the idea of the social safety net existing and the entitlement as a property interest of the social safety net. That this is something that we as a society have agreed that we don't want our citizens, our people, to experience want on the level that they did in the Great Depression and other times in our history. And we want to have this net. And so that's why I'm so privileged and honored to be able to do this work and really laser focus on things like SNAP food benefits or Medicaid and different things that protect people from those really difficult adverse experiences.
Thank you, Ellie. And I will note for Nick's sake that you also use Michigander because I am in the minority.
Yeah.
So
I was going to
he
jump
is
in and
winning.
say
Well, that's
Um,
good for the Michigander then.
That's right. Um, I want to talk to you a little bit about the upcoming HR1, but you said something that was really important that I want to flesh out a little bit. You know, the social safety net, the word entitlement, gets a really bad rap these days, right? And so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about why you think it's important and how maybe a different spin on sort of what you hear out there, all these people who are just taking advantage of stuff. Has that been
Yeah,
your experience?
I feel so lucky working with legal aid attorneys and working with people who experience poverty, because I see this level of resourcefulness and stick-to-itiveness that I think is often unappreciated. We what these programs that are often talked about, and perhaps maligned sometimes, they exist for this idea of a safety net. And if you imagine a net that's sort of an equal, if you wanted a safety net under you while you were walking a tightrope, you'd probably check that it's taut, check that it actually sort of would catch you if it fell, right? Maybe you'd be looking for things to be like evenly spaced, and the netting to actually catch you. And I would say that our safety net looks less like that sort of even spaced out netting that is really designed to catch someone, and more, unfortunately, like very unevenly spaced out. So there are these programs that can be so great that do catch people in these very specific populations. But it is not dispersed right now in such a way as to evenly catch people as they fall through different times in their life when things are difficult. And I feel so honored to have worked alongside legal aid attorneys or worked alongside people themselves who are going through these times in their lives. And I would say that most of the programs, especially let's talk about SNAP right now, that we're about to the food benefits or food assistance program here in Michigan. The budget that somebody gets from this kind of a program is really quite small, and it is designed to be a payer of last resort, like the last resort that somebody would fall to have specifically just enough money to provide a healthy, balanced, thrifty. There's a whole program called the Thrifty budget. So they set what it costs to buy the thrifty basket of goods, right? And then also, they look at all the other resources that this house might have, all the people who prepare food together might have to come in. And they look at what that budget would be to make sure that that house has just enough, based on all the other resources they have. So any other resources you bring in, your food assistance budget is likely to go down. And so it really isn't what people think it is. People often have misconceptions about that, but it's designed really to meet people where they are and provide just enough to make sure that that family doesn't fall into very dire food security. And so I think
That's
that's a helpful way of thinking about it.
That is incredibly helpful, both with the safety net and the food, because one of the things Nick and I talk a lot about is that 40% of Michiganders are one paycheck away from homelessness or poverty. So this could be anyone. You and I work together with domestic violence victims. 80% of women in homelessness are domestic violence victims. It's really anyone from any cross section who might rely on these benefits, and many of them are working poor. And I think it's important that we center that this is not some like get rich. It is a very frugal use of taxpayer dollars, maybe too frugal in the sense that people are sort of still struggling. And as we look at the changes in HR1, um, I would love for you to talk about the impact of what HR1 will do to an already sort of small, what you described as kind of a small basket and those holes that you kind of talked about in the safety net.
Yeah, thank you. I think the some of the first changes that we're going to see from HR1, and so that's what I'll focus on today, is with this SNAP program, this food assistance program here in Michigan is what it's called. And SNAP really provides this interesting coexistence. It's there both to meet the needs of people who are hungry and otherwise would experience food insecurity, and to try to make sure that people who sell food have a market to do that. And so it was created. This is why some people might still know the term food stamps. It was created to make sure that there's enough places that the food that's being produced meets the need that is out there, and that there's also the market. And so it's supposed to sort of solve both problems in some ways. And so that kind of coming together of the SNAP program, both sides are going to be hurt as we see this roll out. Some of the first changes that we're starting to see right now are with I'll refer to it very generally as work requirements. It's also called time-limited food assistance, which is basically the upshot of the change right now is that most adults who are 18 to 64 who don't have dependents would now need to work 80 hours per month, so at least half time. Or they might be able to participate in volunteering or job training to maintain SNAP for that person in the household past 3 months. So they would have 3 months of time to get this to either meet the requirements or be eligible for a deferral within a 3-year period. They would have that member of the household would have their food assistance stopped. So this
That's a
could
big
create,
deal, right?
it's
Because
a
it's
big
already
deal.
balanced.
Yes.
Like that basket you talked about to be just enough. So we're talking about
Yes,
people going hungry.
precisely. There's each family is just getting exactly what the thrifty budget is
And I'm
supposed to be. And that thrifty budget is actually going down, which is another an over time we expect that the result of HR1 to be that the budget itself will the buying power of that will go down because of
That's really
the
interesting because I know when I go to the grocery store and I am not as good at thrifty shopping, the it seems like food costs are way up.
That's right. And simultaneously, another program was cut that was designed to help educate people on how to cook with low price items in a way to feed a full family. So there were all these things that SNAP was doing to try to help people really have decent buying power and then also have enough education to be able to provide a healthy meal for their families with the relatively meager amount that's coming in. But these work requirements are kind of interesting because, as I'm saying, there's really SNAP has never provided enough that somebody would say, "Oh, great, I'm getting SNAP. I don't have to work." If they're not working, most families, most individuals who are not working, there's a really good reason. And there was a Center for Budget and Policy Priorities estimate that this could impact about 250,000 Michiganders that could be impacted by this change. So
That's a
the
lot.
really important, yeah, it's a lot of people. The really important thing that I want to make sure is out there right now, because we see some counties, a few counties, Kent, and Oakland, as well as Livingston County, may start to see their SNAP budgets decrease because of work requirements, and it's actually something that predated the HR1 changes, but might start to see some of their changes starting as soon as this month. But most people, with the exception of several certain counties and certain cities, who are going to be impacted by this, will be impacted by it. Will really see their diminished amounts on SNAP starting in June. And so this is the time that people can come to the MDHHS, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and explain that they are eligible for a deferral or an exemption. Because many people, like I said, who may not be getting, who may not be working or may not be working up to half time, they're often not in that position because there's a reason for it. So people who are pregnant, disabled, people who are caring for a disabled person or caring for a child, anyone who's unable to work due to health reasons or being a survivor of domestic violence. Or has a similar circumstance. I think there's arguments that people who are unhoused would be able to say that they are mentally or physically unfit for work and should be eligible for a deferral. Um, if any of these circumstances are going on, substance use is another. If you're in the struggle with substance use, you may be able to secure a deferral while you're engaging that issue. So
And
all
for
of these are things that people should document soon.
folks who don't know, what exactly is a deferral? What does it do for
Yeah.
the person who's with food stamps?
Yeah, for what it would do for now is to say, for this, as long as this reason exists, as long as you're pregnant, as long as you're caring for this disabled person, as long as you experience a disability yourself, during that time, you wouldn't have to meet the 20 hours of a week, roughly 80 hours a month of work requirements. So it would defer you, like put off that the need to meet those requirements to keep that person in your household eligible.
This sounds kind of complicated. Like if I were on food stamps, I'd be sort of confused about what I do. Is there a place folks can go or learn more about this issue? Because it just seems super complicated.
It is very complicated. In fact, I'm an attorney, and this is one of my main focus areas. And I had to make myself a little flow chart to understand it, to be totally honest with you. It is complicated. There's sort of a few opportunities to impact your situation. If you are concerned that this could impact you, and you believe, and especially if you believe there might be a good reason you're not able to work that might make you eligible for a deferral, what the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services is encouraging people to do is to contact their local office or there's a main phone number that I can make sure everybody has to reach out to the department. We at Legal Aid are also encouraging people to submit something in writing that, if possible, that explains their eligibility for that deferral, sort of to protect themselves so that they have that
It doesn't get
documentation and they can.
lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Things do get lost sometimes. And also, the other opportunity is to show that you are meeting that work requirement. So maybe you are working in gig employment or working in something that you don't have as well documented right now. Like now is the time to start finding ways to document, whether you're volunteering, whether you're caring. One population might be people who care for their grandchildren or people in like there's a lot of wonderful people out there that care for other people's kids, right, while they're working. Documenting some of these things now might prevent you from receiving what they're calling countable months, right? Months that you needed to meet the work requirements that you weren't. But we've also, because one of the really difficult things about this whole situation is that the federal changes were made so quickly that the state has had a really difficult task ahead of it in trying to respond. And so, Michigan Legal Help, my organization is associated with an organization called Michigan Legal Help. Michigan Legal Help is a great website if you're looking to navigate plain language, simple things in on legal topics. And one of the topics that we've posted about is helping sort through the work requirements, the work rules for food assistance. And on that, we have placed a attestation form that can help people send in documentation to Michigan Department of Health and Human Services to say the reasons they believe they might be eligible for a deferral.
I have a couple of follow-up questions. How often do folks have to do this? Because I mean, I got three kids. Like, this seems like a lot to do. I'm going to say, because I can say it, like, I think that HR1 created a terrible solution for something that wasn't a problem. So how often are these folks who are affected going to have to, take time out of their life to be able to provide all of this documentation?
I'm going to answer the second part of your question first, and then get to the details. I do think if you look to some of the research that has been done on states that have had these requirements longer, and Michigan also has at different times had similar requirements. Um, it's been we've been waived from a lot of them for a long time. The results are much like what you're describing, that the work requirements don't work. Um, they end up causing food insecurity for families who do really need the benefits, mostly because of administrative difficulties and the difficulty of remaining within benefits, even if you are eligible, because there is an impact that scarcity has on your life. That when you are trying to make ends meet, when you are trying to do everything you can to remain housed, you often don't have the wherewithal to meet each and every one of these requirements, and some of the details can be difficult. We've seen notices already in this process go out that unfortunately weren't quite right? Like weren't quite accurate. There's a few notices that have gone out to people in counties or cities that were actually waived and shouldn't have to comply with these. And then we've also seen a difficulty for people in documenting and getting access to those deferrals. And so we often in the public benefits world see a phenomenon that is referred to as churn, where people are, fall off of benefits that they truly are eligible for, and then have a really difficult time getting back on and staying on. And so, to answer your question more specifically, this will happen on determination and redetermination. But first off, now that many people are newly eligible or newly subject, I should say, to these um, requirements, people should expect notices, and many people have gotten notices about this. And as soon as they start seeing notices, they do need to show either that they are deferred or follow steps that should be outlined either in their MyBridges account or on notices that they're mailed to show that they are working. And so some of those details are still taking shape, how exactly people will be able to show that they're meeting these requirements, which is why we went ahead and made a form to try to help people show that they're deferred, and then also to show that they might be doing the things that they need to do to satisfy those requirements.
Well, I appreciate everything that you and your group and the nonprofits you work for are doing, particularly because we have cross-section of populations. I want to invite you back after this sort of takes effect so we can talk. I'd love to talk more about the economic impact because we just are not going to have time on places like our farmers in Michigan and our farmers markets. It's really interesting to me. I know lots of people get fresh fruit and vegetables from their community at their farmers markets. It's going to affect small growers a lot. But I want to ask, just to tie up, if people listening to this want to get involved, if they want to help, how they can do that, and if you have any closing thoughts, what you just really want people to know, whether they're receiving food stamps or not, sort of if, Elly Jordon ran the world, what would be the one thing that you want people to take away from this?
Well, I would love to see anyone who is believes they may be subject to the work requirements for SNAP, submitting information to their local office as quickly as possible to show whether they may be deferred from those or might be actually working or doing other work, other volunteer work or studying in such a way that they should be meeting those so that they don't lose benefits in the first place and we don't see the churn that I fear might take place. And if people want to get involved, that's a wonderful question. The Food Resource and Advocacy Council is like the nationwide organization that I would look to. But certainly check out my website. I do try to put up blog stuff and things like that to keep people informed. And your local United Way is also keeping their hands on the pulse of this, as well as the Food Bank Council of Michigan, are looking to support this. I know the Food Bank Council of Michigan will be sending out some social media posts that service providers, anybody, service providers can use to educate people about this. And they also run a food and other resources hotline that can be very helpful. They would be able to help somebody navigate like submitting information, things like that. There's a last update that I know we're short on time, but I feel I should make is very quickly that this is coming alongside one of the largest change in benefits for SNAP for people who are immigrants and refugees. And so people like refugees, asylees, and survivors of human trafficking starting probably in June will be losing access to SNAP
Just
at the same time.
completely losing access.
Correct.
I am so glad you brought that to our attention. I definitely want to make sure that folks are aware that folks are going to be going hungry, and these are folks who are victims of violence, who have fled their countries, and may have status, right?
Correct. Do have status.
Do have
Undocumented people
status,
are not eligible at all.
right? Who have had status in the past. So that just seems cruel, right? Like these are people that have come, we've given them refugee status, they're going through the correct process, and we suddenly just cut them off benefits. If people are really worried about those folks, one, I wanted to return to making sure people know that you're at mplp.org, because you said your website, make sure folks
Yep.
know what it is. Is there somewhere that folks can also reach out to make sure they're specifically helping immigrants, refugees, victims of trafficking, which is my goodness, and other forms of, persecuted, traumatized folks who may just need food security?
Yeah. I think one of the places that is going to be filling the gap is going to be the Food Bank Council of Michigan. The food banks are going to have to provide what they would tell you is they're not designed to replace SNAP, but at these times and for some populations, unfortunately, I think they may have to. But also the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center is a wonderful place to go to support people because through advocacy with the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center and the Protecting Immigrant Families Coalition, we were able to make sure that people who adjusted to lawful permanent residence from those positions, if they're eligible, if they're able to do so, would be able to immediately have access to food benefits. Most lawful permanent residents have to wait 5 years before they're able to access SNAP. And so those people from those humanitarian populations, once they adjust to lawful permanent residence, should become immediately eligible for SNAP. And this may be a good, if they're able to access legal services to make that transition, assuming that everything goes smoothly, they may be able to retain their benefits.
And I know that the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center has been under attack financially. Can you give the website in case folks want to donate? Because that sounds incredibly important to protect people's rights and to get sure that people don't go hungry. It just would be great if folks, if you take away, donate to your food banks and donate to MERC, which is the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center. Do you have their website?
Yep, it's at michiganimmigrant.org. If you write out those words,
MichiganImmigrant.org.
michiganimmigrant.org.
We'll make sure that goes out. Elly, we're hoping you'll come back. Your work is amazing. And we are so grateful that we have you in our state to help shed a light on these sort of very awful and cruel policies that are going to affect, our communities.
Thank you so much for having me and right back at you both.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Elly.
Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That was our incredibly dedicated colleague, Elly Jordon. Lot of important, amazing, inspiring work, but really rough stuff to hear. Nick, I know you've also been working, again, doing direct work with the homeless camps and working in federal policy because you get to do boots in the ground and our federal and state work. I'm hoping you will share what your experience has been recently with both. So if you could maybe talk to us a little bit about your DC trip and your work so far, we'd be so grateful.
Yeah, I mean, Sarah, you bring up a great point. I mean, this is timely. Food benefits are important. People are going to starve. And as you know, as a mother, if you have a choice to make between feeding your kids or paying your rent, uh,
Gonna feed my kids.
you're going to
Like I'm
feed your
not gonna
kids.
let them cry. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a hard decision. It really is because you're going to be stressed, and then the bills pile up real quick, and then you get an eviction notice. You can't fight the eviction notice, and then you end up on the streets. The cutting of SNAP, it's a bureaucratic red tape that puts in barriers in place that keep people from moving on. Yes, you cut off maybe $150 to you and I. That may not seem like a lot, but to somebody that's living paycheck to paycheck, $150 is a lot of money. If
Well, and how about the fact that we're cutting completely off folks who are come to this country legally that have status that are just fleeing violence in their countries? That seems just unnecessary.
Right, and we're seeing a continuation of the vulnerable populations being pushed further and further to the margins. And I go back to the bureaucratic red tape. We're not only just doing it with SNAP benefits, but we're also doing it with Medicaid. So now you have two systems where you're having to report everything in, and it's not, and maybe the mother or the father's working two, three jobs to stay into those apartments because we know from the Gap report that was released a couple weeks ago that uh, those that are in the extremely low income category and the very low income category, 75% of those households are cost burden on living to pay for um, their living. They're paying over 50% of their check to their rent, which
And you
is hard. So if you take $150 away from them, where's that $150 going to come from? It's probably going to come out of their rent paycheck. Or if they're
yeah,
a family that's in a shelter, that's $150 that they were going to use to get into an apartment. And it's just a vicious cycle. And then let's say they get kicked off Medicaid because they forget to redetermine at 6 months, or they moved out of their last place that they lived and have moved around a couple times. They don't redetermine. Then they don't have medical insurance. Now you're paying, even if you're a 64-year-old, 63-year-old woman living by herself, you're trying to figure out, you have a health emergency, you go to the doctor, you find out you don't have health care anymore. And it's just this bureaucratic red tape. They're still eligible, but it's not,
I
it's
think
just cutting them off.
Ellie called it churn, right? We churn
Yep.
people, and it's a kind of a good word for the violence of it, right? I want you said something really interesting. Can you back up and talk about what the gap report is, what cost burdened
Yep.
is, for those of us who don't live the day-to-day
Yeah.
of, economic policy?
So sometimes I get geeked out on the nerdy inside baseball stuff. So yeah, the Gap report is put out every year by the National Low Income Housing Coalition, which Micah is a state partner to. So we are in partnership with the National Low Income Housing Coalition. They put out this Gap report, and basically it says for each housing category, from you know upper class to middle class to low income to very low income to extremely low income, how much housing stock's available, and how those influence each other. Michigan, unfortunately, is trending backwards. Uh, in this report, we last year in 2024, because the report's a year behind, in 2024, there was 303,000 households that lived in extremely low income category. Now we're at 309,000. Additionally, our housing stock has continued to decrease. 2 years ago, for the extremely low income housing category, we had 185. We were short 185,000 units for rental. Now we're 195,000 units short. And then the cost burden takes a look at how much of the paycheck of the individuals has to go towards rent. And right now, last year's report, Michigan was at, for extremely low income and very low income, 74% of the individuals were facing cost burden. Now we're up to 75%. And because we have a shortage in housing stock, because everybody wants to talk about the missing middle, and we have a housing shortage across the spectrum. But the problem is if you and I need a rental, we can go down in pay categories to get a rental that fits our family's needs. People that are existing at the low income, very low income, extremely low income, they can't move up to a middle income or a high income earner to grab one of their rental properties. So we have this downward pressure. So a year ago, there were 39 rentals available per 100 renters at the extremely low income category. We are now down to 37. So that means 63 people in the 63 households at the extremely low income category cannot find a place to even rent because of that downward pressure.
That is incredibly helpful. So I've noticed that there's been a lot of discussion because you mentioned the Michigan Middle, and the governor has some proposals to build us more housing. What is your take on all of that, and tapping into the Michigan Housing Fund to sort of make that work? Like, I'm probably not even using the right words, but maybe you can explain the proposal and then talk about sort of where your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so the governor proposed in her budget expansion to the Michigan Housing Community Development Fund, which is housed inside the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, to give it some flexibility to work on. Right now, it's only targeted for low income, extremely low income households for affordable housing. The governor's proposal has asked to increase that to what we are referring to as the missing middle. Sounds good. Maybe right now that's what we need. But at a minimum, that proposal alone will take 6 to 8 years to even get enough housing stock out there to help those in the extremely low and low income. This
like some sort of trickle down housing theory? Like, does that work?
Well, we know as you increase stock and increase supply, there is going to be some trickle down, but in the meantime, we're going to continue to see more and more homeless. We have an aging housing stock in the state of Michigan. It's becoming less and less maintained. It's getting older. We have asbestos problems. We have lead problems. What we need is a both solution. We need more rental assistance. We need eviction protections and an increase in housing stock. And then also truly affordable housing, not just $300,000 homes that are affordable to college-educated people with professional jobs. We need housing that's affordable for those that are working 2 to 3 jobs just trying to make ends meet.
That sounds right. It sounds like we need, because 6 to 8 years is a lot more homeless folks, right? And you've mentioned before that wages just don't have the buying power. So these are lots of folks who are working hard simply can't afford housing, let alone $300,000 worth of housing. That's not a lot of Michigan. So my question then is, what does that look like? So we can support sort of the missing middle, but it's not a solution, right, to what we need.
Right. We need those eviction protections. We need more investment in rental assistance. We need more investments in outreach, more investment in permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing. That's where investments will actually get to those that are currently unhoused or precariously housed, and ensure that we don't see more homelessness on the streets. Increasing the housing stock is part of the solution. It's not my fear is people are going to grab the football, say, yes, we passed the changes to Michigan Housing Community Development Fund. We're starting to build houses. Oh, by the way, we're doing some of these zoning changes, and they're going to spike the football and say we solved homelessness. When in a year from now, you're going to see more people on the streets.
And then they're going to be concerned that the programs aren't working correctly, which,
Correct.
as we've talked about, is nothing to do with the programming. It has everything to do with the economics. So it also sounds like, we talk about tenant protections. One of those is now I was evicted when I was in college, and that would still be on my record, right? Even though I've been out of college for 30 years. The one of the low-hanging fruit everyone's always talked about is sort of sealing or expunging evictions, and that wouldn't even cost the administration money, correct?
Correct. I mean, that is one of the biggest barriers for people that are unhoused face. They've either been evicted in the past, like you were explaining, and that sticks with them. And sometimes they don't even have to be found. I mean, I will defer to you, counselor,
They
on
just
the
have to
lawyer terms.
filed an
But so,
eviction. It doesn't mean if there was even a judgment or they were even found that they were owed money, right? It's just there.
right, yeah, and that can bar somebody from getting into housing, and then that then goes into the criminalization of homelessness that we're seeing across the board, across communities, across states, across cities, townships, where now you fine somebody or give them a misdemeanor for just trying to exist in public, and then that goes
And
on
they've
their
got another
record.
record in
Yep.
addition to their
So
eviction. Yeah.
yeah, so we need to really start treating people with dignity and understanding that there are for the 33,000 unhoused Michiganders, there are 33,000 reasons why they're unhoused. And in trying to find solutions that are multi-pronged. Nobody has to do that. There is going to be no silver bullet. There's going to be no one single answer. We need to work together to come up with multiple solutions and cover the gambit on what is possible.
But it sounds like making it harder. I agree we should treat people with respect, but we also should do practical things, and it doesn't make any sense to make it harder for people to get housed by giving them a criminal record that doesn't reflect anything to do with about their propensity of violence or hurting other people. It's just existing, right? So between that and the evictions, those are two really big policy things that we could do. We could just not criminalize people and we could seal the evictions. And those are two big policy things that wouldn't cost money that we could solve today, right? Like if we ran the world.
Right. Right. Yeah. No. And you're right. Those ideas are out there floating in the state legislature, especially the sealing of the evictions. There's a tenant protections package out there in both the Senate and in the House, but because of pushback from the industry, pushback from on the politics side, it's not moving. Even though many states are passing it, and it makes it. Like you said, it makes an immediate impact on somebody that's just trying to stabilize their life.
So what are the potential downsides of sealing the evictions? I mean, is there anything really useful about that information? Like, if you found out that I got into trouble 20 years ago economically, that doesn't really tell you anything about me, right?
Right, and I think that's the bigger conversation. And I know a lot of the smaller rentals, what we call the mom and pop rentals, they really want to know more about what the person is like now. And I think sometimes you scare people when they see an eviction pop up on the rental application. But when, like in your case, was 20 plus years ago, it was a lifetime in your life. It was a lifetime ago.
No, really it was.
So
I would
yeah,
also say, you brought this up, and I know we're probably getting close to time, but I want you to talk a little bit. It all goes to this idea that we're trying to find a quick way to put people in buckets to make them sort of different, right? Who have run into some trouble.
mhm,
And, I know you're from rural Michigan, I'm from rural Michigan. We all know people and have people in our families. Doesn't mean they're bad that have run into a little bit of trouble. Why do you think this is happening? Like, why are we suddenly willing to just put people in these buckets of like good and bad?
and that's something that I think I wrestle with every day is, how do we explain that we need to stop othering people? We're all people. We all go through different changes in life, and we all have different experiences, and we all are people with lived experience. Just some of the experiences are different. But how do we communicate that, and how do we realize that we're all trying to survive. And I think we're in a point now in history where it's almost okay to other people. And when we look back, when we other people saying they're less than us or they're somebody else than us, it just degrades our society. And to have those conversations and understand where people are coming from and see it through their lens could make a big difference at this point.
Well, as a proud Michigander, I am going to say that that's not who we are as Michiganders, and
Right.
we can do better. Because I know part of the joy of being from Michigan and being from the Midwest is we don't believe in that. So I guess our call to action this week is just to get to know your neighbors and hear their stories, whether and maybe talk to somebody on the street that you might not always have talked about to, somebody different than you, maybe somebody who's fallen on a little bit of hard times. Just listen without judging, because community is the only thing that makes a difference. It's when people settled Michigan, it's what saved us, right? The co-ops, the getting through the winters. We are not those people, and I am proud of that. So I guess as I ask you to, join us in working to make Michigan better, the call to action is sort of reject this nonsense that you can tell who people are by their paycheck.
That's great. And, you bring up a good point. Join Micah, help us continue this advocacy, help us to reach out to different groups, and to share the story of those that are precariously housed and unhoused. Just like we said in our title, unhoused and unfiltered. So,
Well, this has been a great episode. Please join us next week or next episode. We'll have Johanna Kononen from the Michigan Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence.
thank you, everyone, and have a great week.
Thank you.